Hello entrepreneurs, it's Michael Mort with Argent Place Law, the law firm for entrepreneurs. Today I want to talk about how much to contribute in capital to your company when you start up. We get this question a lot. The last page of our operating agreement lists all the owners, how much interest they have in the company, and how much money or property they've put into the company. This is important for several reasons that I'll get into in a minute. But before I answer the question of how much, I need to tell you a few things about capital contributions. First of all, you have to get money into the company for operations. There's really only about three good ways of getting money into the company. First is you can contribute capital, you could take out a loan, or you could have sales. There is a fourth way you could take a gift, but that's very, very uncommon. And if it's a for-profit company, then the donor, the giftor, can't take a tax deduction for the gift anyway, so it's very unlikely. So, capital contributions, taking out a loan, or have sales. Well, at the very beginning, you're not likely to be able to get a loan, except if it's a loan from one of the members, and you probably don't have any sales yet, so mostly at the beginning, the company's going to rely on cash that's contributed to the company. Now, that's not a taxable event when you start out, but there are some things that you have to consider. When you put money into the company, say you put in, it forms a basis in the company for future tax events. For example, if you put in $100,000 into your company in year one, and it grows in like 3 years, it might be worth $200,000, and somebody wants to buy it from you. You can sell it to them. You sell it to them for $200,000. Well, you have a basis in the company of 100, and then you sell it for 200. That means you had a capital gains of $100,000. It's just like if you bought stock on the open market in some major public corporation. So the amount of money that you put in forms the basis. It's usually not a big consideration because you're putting in a small amount of money and hopefully you sell it for a large amount of money later. So the difference isn't going to make much difference. But there is another consideration. If you have partners and you each put in a different amount of money, you have to be very careful about how that's judged. If you don't have an operating agreement that allocates interest in the company in the ways that you want to, and you put in different amounts, you're going to be subject to the default rules of the state. And in Virginia in particular, and many other states, the ownership of the company is proportional to the amount of capital each owner puts in. So either always put in the same amount of money if you want to be equal partners, or put in proportion to the ownership interest you want, or have an operating agreement that says what your ownership interest is going to be, and it's irrespective. Doesn't depend on how much capital you put in. Okay, let's see. Oh, by the way, when you start the company and you put capital in, you need to have a capital account for each owner. It keeps track of how much capital each is put in, and a few other things like rollover interest profits that aren't taken out of the company. Capital contributions can be in the form of three things. They can be cash, you put money into the company. You can put in property that has to be valued compared to the cash of somebody else. For example, if one of the owners has written some software beforehand or owns a vehicle that they want to put into the company, any kind of property whatsoever, and you put that into the company as your capital contribution, then the value of that property becomes their capital contribution. You could put in services. For example, one of the owners might not have cash or property put in, but they're willing to put in services and not get reimbursed, not get paid. So the value of those services becomes their capital contribution. All right, now let's talk about how much you should put in. If you're putting in cash and the company is not going to have a large amount of draw, like it's at the beginning, the draw is minimal, the obligations you're going to have to meet, I suggest you put in about 3 to 6 months worth of operating expenses. After that, what happens if the company runs out of money? Well, you could all put in more capital. The situation has to be explicitly outlined in your operating agreement, so all the partners are in agreement with how much capital you might put in. There might be like a cap on how much you have to put in, and everybody's obligated, or something like that. There are a myriad of options. Another possibility that's a little simpler is that instead of putting in additional capital, you, the owners, lend money to the company. Now those loans have priority over distributions, especially on the dissolution of the company. There's lots of things to talk about there. But the main thing is those loans do not affect your ownership interest. If you lend money to the company, you have a right to get it back. Of course, you'll have some kind of a promissory note the company will sign and say when and how much interest, when it'll be paid back, how much interest will be paid to you, the lender. But by you lending money to the company, you don't get you don't automatically get additional ownership interest. So, long answer to the simple question of how much capital should I contribute, but you need to know all these things when you start out so that you don't get caught up in the future. So I'm Michael Mort, Large in Place Law, the law firm for entrepreneurs, and we're here looking out for you. Thanks for listening.